Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Laura Owens.
And I'm Jan Black.
What's it like to have a transgender child? That's the focus of this show as we talk with Mimi Lemay, a forceful advocate for transgender rights and author of the memoir, What We Will Become, a mother, a son, and a journey of transformation.
Mimi is the mother of 3 children, one of whom is Jacob, a transgender 9-year-old. Mimi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us how you came to know that your 2.5-year-old at the time was transgender.
Well, it took a while. When Jacob first started to tell us that he was a boy, I just thought it was play acting, and I didn't pay it much mind at all. And it wasn't until several months later when it was accompanied with, a change in mood and attitude, a sadness, and he was so persistent about it that I started to listen. But at that time, I hadn't heard of transgender children, barely heard the word transgender at all. And it didn't come together for over a year and a half, which in the life of a small child is a really long time. I tried to eliminate anything I thought that could be bothering him other than a gender identity issue. So we tried to make sure that we talked about the quality of toys and everything was, it doesn't matter what you play with. It doesn't matter. Boys and girls can do equal things and they can do the same things. And there's no real difference, I said. But that did not satisfy him. He knew who he was from a very young age. And he told us that insistently for over a year and a half before we realized that we had to give him the choice to live as he truly knew that he was.
You hear about a lot of terms related to people being transgender, and I was wondering if you could just let us know exactly what the definition is for those who don't understand it and what the difference is between gender identity and sexual orientation.
That's a great question, and it's an important one. Being transgender is having a gender identity, which is a deeply felt, known identity about who you are, which is the opposite of what your sex was assigned at birth. Mm-hmm. So my son was assigned female at birth because the doctor took a look in between his legs and said, you have a baby girl. But as he developed, his own understanding of himself and his gender was male. So as soon as he was able to articulate it, as soon as he knew the difference between boy and girl, he started to identify as a male. And that hasn't really changed. Cisgender is when your gender identity is the same as the sex assigned at birth. And sexual orientation is different because it's about your romantic attraction to other people, which is very different than your innate sense of whether you're male, female, or something else. And I say something else because it's important in this discussion not to forget non-binary people, which is folks who don't quite feel like they fit into the boy or girl category.
And what was involved in your son's transition from assigned female to affirmed male at the age of 4?
At the age of 4, it meant we allowed him to choose a name that he felt represented him. So in his case, it was Jacob. We switched pronouns. So we started using he, him, his all the time. And he, as he expressed himself with his clothing and his hair, it was the way he felt that best. He felt most comfortable. So for him, it was a short haircut and all boy clothes. And that was it.
I really like the story you tell about how you came to ask Jacob whether or not he thought he could be transgender. And it was a video that you guys saw together. And I was wondering if you could share that story with our listeners.
So for months, we had kind of been in this, I think of it as a kind of purgatory for him, unfortunately, but where, we acknowledged that he might one day be transgender or that maybe he had a gender identity that was different than his sex assigned at birth, but we weren't yet willing to kind of pull the Band-Aid off and actually transition him. It was less that we weren't willing, more that we were kind of holding tight in a holding pattern, not realizing fully how much this was hurting him. And when we did realize that a transition was imminent and it was time to give him that choice, we found ourselves wondering how to show him the possibility of what he could become, what he could live as. Because unfortunately, I feel like we had maybe lost some of his trust, that we were fully on board with him. And he knew that people thought that it was odd. We didn't use that word, of course, and we were very supportive, but, people thought he looked funny or talked or, dressed funny. And those messages had gotten through to him. And we were worried that he wouldn't believe that he could be who he wanted to be always. And so we said, how do we show him? There weren't many things out there at all. There weren't a lot of stories, very few, 1, 2 at the most, about transgender kids. And one of those stories was a little slideshow that a family in California had put together and put online, and it had recently gone viral. And folks had been sending it to us because they knew, that those who knew something about what Jacob was going through. And so we decided to play that for him and just see what his reaction would be, without pushing him toward any direction, but just saying, listen, this is an option. And we did. And we had to play it. He asked us to play it over and over again, especially a certain part where the young child Rylan speaks and says, I'm a brother. And by the end of it, I think he began to be excited about the possibility that he could live the way he always knew himself to be. And that is what he chose. He said, we asked him and he said, I want to be a boy always, a boy named Jacob. And so he has been.
In addition to Jacob, you have 2 daughters. How were they different when they were 2 years old as compared with Jacob?
Well, they would play like any child, dress up and pretend. So, you would be a princess or a unicorn, but they picked up and left off those games within a normal period of time. And there was no distress that accompanied it. So my daughter, for example, loved, I think it was, she went through a phase of loving unicorns. So she would be a unicorn. But she knew she wasn't a unicorn, and she was not distressed at being a girl. So that's the difference. It's the difference between what is superficial, your expression on the outside, you can change, children explore, and something that was deeply felt. And the fact that he wasn't able to live as a boy was hurting him. And I could see that because it was accompanied by distress. He became very anxious. He became sad. And this was persistent. It kept going and going for over 1.5 years.
And I want to talk about your own personal journey and how you had to transition from your hopes and dreams for M to those that you would have for Jacob.
It was a slow progression to be able to work through those feelings. I think it hit me in a blinding moment, and I talk about this in the book, that my child was not thriving and that they possibly could be transgender, that this was real for them. But working through my feelings took longer. And I did feel something that was akin to grief. And it's difficult for me to say that because I don't ever want my child to hear me say that I'm grieving his loss, when really what happened was I got the truest form of himself, and that most joyful form of my child back. But nevertheless, there are those hopes and dreams that you talked about, and they do shift, and you have to adapt. And what I kept reminding myself is, look how happy this kid is. Look how joyful. This is something I hadn't seen before. This kind of joy, not for a long time, not since he was a little toddler. And who are we but the spirit? And the spirit was alive and the spirit was thriving. And that was enough to get me through that.
Our Nobody Told Me conversation continues in just a minute after we tell you about a gift idea that we love and you may want to consider.
The holidays are just around the corner, and there's one gift that thousands of moms like me have been calling the best gift ever. For a really special gift for the special people in your life, you've got to check out the Skylight Frame.
The Skylight Frame is a touchscreen photo frame you can update instantly by email. Anything from anywhere. It sets up effortlessly in under 60 seconds. Just plug it in, use the touchscreen to connect to your wireless network, and enjoy.
Everyone in the family can just email photos to your Skylight Frame, and they will appear in seconds. It has a black frame and white mat, so it looks like a real photo frame that adds a beautiful touch to your home.
Skylight Frame has a gorgeous 10-inch touchscreen. I love the way it looks in my apartment. You can swipe through photos with your finger and even tap to thank the person who sent the photo.
It's 100% satisfaction guaranteed. If you don't love your skylight, they'll offer you a full refund. You can preload it with your favorite photos for a personalized gift.
Tens of thousands of families like ours use Skylight to stay connected. It's so simple that even our non-tech savvy relatives have had no trouble setting it up and using it.
Now, as a special holiday offer, you can get $10 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com and enter code NOBODY.
That's right. To get $10 off your purchase of a Skylight frame, just go to skylightframe.com and enter code NOBODY. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com, promo code NOBODY.
How did you do your research on what it means to be transgender? Because I was looking this up and it says less than 1% of the population is transgender. So you must have been feeling a little bit unsure yourself, or maybe a lot unsure yourself about what it means to be transgender.
Absolutely. And back in 2014, there wasn't a lot of information out there for parents. And I was given the name of a gender clinic in Boston, the Gender Education Management Clinic. At the time, that's what it was called, and Boston Children's Hospital. And I called them up, and they said, "Well, we can give you the name of a therapist who might be able to help you, but we don't take kids that young." And the protocol at the time was, if you have a kid that appears to be transgender, you just you do something called watchful waiting. Is you kind of keep them in that holding pattern. If they don't demand a transition, you try to shy away from it. That protocol has changed. The understanding now is that even in very young children like my son, at the age of 4, they know their gender identity just as strongly and as deeply and frequently as permanently as a cisgender child. So at that time, there wasn't a lot to direct me toward a transition, but there were resources. I did manage to speak to the therapist that was recommended, and we spoke for hours on end about this. She saw Jacob, and we listened to our kid and we listened to our heart, because we could see that he wasn't happy. And we knew that there were statistics for transgender people that were very frightening. When they aren't affirmed, when they don't have the respect and dignity and the ability to live authentically, a darkness can set in. And there's a very high suicide attempt rate in transgender people.
What has research shown about the discrimination that transgender people face, and what struggles has Jacob faced personally in terms of bullying and fitting in?
The research shows that discrimination in every walk of life and every form of activity, whether it's workplace, in accessing healthcare and education, is tragically still very high for trans people. National Center for Transgender Equality puts out a study every few years, and the numbers are still shockingly high. I'm thinking around 70% for folks in the workplace. So think about it, going in every day and having to deal with people devaluing your humanity. Jacob, thankfully, and I think in part it's because of, the community that we've been blessed to live in, and partly because we're in Massachusetts as well, and the broader Commonwealth is a place where there is a greater understanding, I think, of human rights when it comes to LGBTQ folks. We haven't had any bullying directly. The bullying that happens is online, and it's directed at me as an advocate. And that is something that I am equipped to deal with, because I love my kid and I know where a lot of this hatred is coming from, and it's coming from ignorance. But I'm lucky, and Jacob is lucky. He's had it really good. And we talk about what would happen if kids did say something. And I think he feels anxious about it sometimes, but I feel like he has the sense that he knows who he is and that he is proud to be a member of this community. And that means everything to me.
Do you ever have regrets about going public with your struggle and his struggle?
November 9th, 2016. Yes, I did. And There were many frightening months right after this administration was put into power. We knew what was coming. We didn't know what form it would take. As it turned out, it was the repeal of rollback of all manner of rights that had been put in place by the Obama administration. So we had, in education, we had the rescission of the Title IX protections. We had the transgender military ban. We had discrimination in housing and in employment. It was tough. It was tough for those first few months, and there were moments of regret. But I do feel that my son is feeling more and more as he grows up empowered by the advocacy we do. For a while, I siloed off my advocacy, and I kind of left him and let him be, and he didn't come with us and do talk to legislators and stuff. There was a time that he kind of just preferred not to be in the mix. And recently, he's 9 now, maybe at about 8.5, he started asking me to attend events and, meetings about legislation and things like that, which is kind of remarkable for a boy of his age. And I think it has empowered him. I hope it has empowered him. He talks about changing hearts and minds, and he is. And it's a powerful example. If nobody stands up and nobody speaks out and stories aren't shared, I'm afraid the change doesn't happen.
What kinds of conversations should parents be having with their children if they have a classmate like Jacob?
Mm-hmm. First off, respect their identity. They are who they say they are. It can't be easy. Treat them like you would anyone else. They are who they say they are, and know that they might have some challenges, and be a friend for them. I think parents should explain to their kids what transgender is. It's not catchy. Explain gender identity. Explain that we're all on a spectrum, and that expression is different than identity, is different than sexual orientation. I think that's profoundly important for kids to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that having two cisgender daughters, two daughters that are not transgender, that understanding that gender is on a spectrum and understanding that gender is not necessarily always binary has been important and empowering for them too. And that's where we come to the other part of my story, growing up in a very ultra-Orthodox Jewish community where things were highly gendered for me too. And I was told exactly what I was expected to do in life, from the cradle to the grave as a woman. And that was not to do something that I was very passionate about, which was learning the Torah and the Talmud the way the men were allowed to and encouraged to. And I feel like if someone had told me at a young age that what I felt about myself and my aspirations and my identity and what I wanted to become was up to me and not up to the rabbis in my community, for example, I wouldn't have had to struggle so much. So I feel that this message is important for children, not only to respect their transgender, non-binary classmates, but also to realize that they don't have to live in a box either when it comes to gender.
Our Nobody Told Me conversation continues in just a minute after we tell you about a way you might be able to save money on life insurance.
Look in the mirror. You look good. You're doing everything right for your health today. But if you're not planning for the what ifs of tomorrow, then it's time you do.
The problem is, historically and rather ironically, people who are health conscious have overpaid and subsidized those who are less health conscious. It's not a conspiracy. It's just how life insurance works.
Introducing Health IQ. Health IQ uses science and data to secure lower rates for people like you on their life insurance.
If you're a runner or a cyclist, or you're into CrossFit or another type of athlete, even a committed weekend warrior, if you're a vegetarian or vegan, then you deserve to be rewarded for your hard work with more affordable life insurance rates.
And Health IQ can save you up to 41% because physically active people have significantly lower risks for heart disease, cancer, and diabetes.
And Health IQ is not just a lead generator. They take the customer through the entire process of applying, and the policy is underwritten by one of their top insurance partners.
But these savings are exclusive to Health IQ. You won't find them anywhere else, and you must qualify to get a special rate.
To see if you qualify, Go to healthiq.com/nobodytoldme to take the proprietary Health IQ quiz. Depending upon your score, as well as other related qualifying factors, you can save up to 41% on your life insurance premiums compared to other providers.
Again, that's healthiq.com/nobodytoldme to let them know we sent you and start the process with the Health IQ quiz. There's no commitment, and you'll learn even more about potential opportunities to be rewarded for your commitment to healthy living.
What would you like to see pediatricians do to make life less uncomfortable for parents of transgender children and for the children themselves?
For starters, don't misgender them and change their names on their forms. Even if their names aren't legally changed yet, I think it takes a little bit of fiddling, but you can get that appropriate name on the chart and make sure that whoever's calling them into the office is using the appropriate names. Because I know many parents and kids who have had humiliating experiences going into a doctor's office and having the wrong name called out. So, for starters, it's the name and the pronouns. Provide education materials for parents and families because a parent may be struggling. Provide resources. Find out where, who are the best clinicians in the area, whether it's for an endocrinologist for prepubescent child, or a kid who's going through puberty and needs to access medical interventions, or it's a therapist that a family might need. Find out who the best people are for your patient so that you can surround them with resources and make resources available to other families so that we can spread the word that transgender kids are normal and they are worthy of respect.
Are you worried about how it will get for Jacob as he gets older? Like, what is that process of transitioning going to look like? And will it be more difficult for him?
There are difficult choices to be made, but for him, from my understanding so far, because we have been several times to visit an endocrinologist, and it has really been all laid out for him, he is very determined to go through a medical transition, which includes puberty blockers. And eventually, when he's about 15 or 16 years old, the choice of whether he wants male hormones. For many parents who aren't going through this process, this sounds very frightening, but this is the standard of care for transgender children because this is life-saving for them. If you had a choice between living at harmony with your body or not, I think that we would choose to live in harmony with our bodies. Mm-hmm. And there are things that we do to our bodies to be more comfortable with them. And this is something that for a transgender child can be life-saving. So there is no choice, in a sense, for me. The choice is his. He gets to choose at every point. He knows what is ahead. He knows, he has recently had a blocker implant put in, and every step of the way, he is a partner with the endocrinologist, with his therapist, with his parents. And he is the one who is directing his own medical care in this regard.
What misconceptions would you like to dispel about transgender children?
Wow, where do I start?
Wherever you want.
First off, nobody is putting very young children on hormones, and nobody is sterilizing or castrating children. This is horrible. I don't even want to bring it up, except that this has been in the news lately, that the misinformation. There is a legislator in Georgia, for example, who is trying to make sure that parents don't get to access blockers until a child is 18. This is ridiculous. There's no point in having puberty blockers well after puberty. Children who are transgender, pushing them off, making them wait to live an authentic life, whatever it means at whatever stage they're at, is painful and it's damaging. Parents who allow early transitions are not doing it to be trendy, to, fit in with some agenda, some political agenda. This is nothing to do with politics. This has to do with the best care for your child.
And what is your hope for the future of transgender youth in America?
I hope that we have a federal government who protects them. I hope that they have equality in healthcare and in housing and in education and in every aspect of life. They deserve it. They are as valuable as any other human life. And I hope that they're accepted and recognized as the unique and authentic people that they are. And that is what I have discovered in this community are some remarkable people, including my son, who show me what it means to be a human being beyond my suit, my flesh and bone. And I hope that they are recognized as equal members of society and are protected as such in our laws.
Who are the role models you would point out to for transgender youth?
Sarah McBride. She was the press secretary. She's now a part-time press secretary, I think, at Human Rights Campaign. Laverne Cox. There's a young man called Casey Sephardini, who is the CEO of Freedom for All America, who's fighting all across this country legislative battles to make sure that trans people are treated equally.
And what advice would you have for parents who think their child may be transgender and don't know what to do about it?
I would reach out to a local PFLAG, Parents for Lesbian and Gay and Transgender Children. These are like local groups that provide wonderful support groups and resources, and they have their kind of their finger on the pulse of what are the best doctors, and how can we get your school to be more affirming. There, in every state there is a PFLAG chapter, if not a dozen of them. So reach out to a PFLAG, local PFLAG. Join a Facebook group for parents of transgender children. Speak to your pediatrician. Ask if there's a gender clinic close by. And go to websites that will teach you how to navigate this process, like GLSEN, GLSEN, which is an education network for trans kids and LGBTQ kids in general. Go to the Human Rights Campaign. There are tons of resources online. Just make sure that when you look for resources that they are affirming, that they will recognize your child instead of the opposite, try to force your child back into a closet. Because again, like I said, that can be so damaging.
Mimi, our show is called Nobody Told Me, and we always ask our guests, what is your Nobody Told Me lesson? So what is it that nobody told you about being the parent of a transgender child that you had to learn on your own and you kind of wished maybe somebody had told you about?
Nobody told me that having a transgender child would mean joining the most remarkable fight of my life, which on some days is emotionally draining, but I have never felt more honored to be a part of anything in my life.
And how can people connect with you on social media and learn more about the book?
That's a great question. So being social media unsavvy, I'm supposed to have put together a website. It's going to be, well, now I have to do it because I'm telling you, mimilemay.com. I have to get going with that. I am on Facebook as well, and I generally accept requests from parents with trans kids. And you can find the book in any retailer that sells the books.
All right.
Awesome.
All right.
You.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Our thanks to Mimi Lemay, author of the memoir, What We Will Become, A Mother, a Son, and a Journey of Transformation. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
You're listening to Nobody Told Me. Thank you so much for joining us.